Hi. What's up, everyone? I appreciate those of you who are muted. If you have sounds, I have dogs barking already in the background. Hey, Allison. Yeah, please feel free to use the chat, guys, during today's sesh. Cool. Lori, hi. Marion, Michelle, Allison, Janine, hi. Very cool. Welcome. You guys doing well? What's going on? Just want to give people a chance to join if they want to join, and we can jump in from there. You guys doing well during all this craziness in the world? I hope so. Feel free to unmute yourself and share if you want to. I'll let you know when we should go back on mute if I'm saying something or if there's background noise.
Hey, Annette.
Hey, hi, Annette. What's going on? Michelle, I see you. Hi. Yeah, great. I love it. Yeah, feel free to join. No worries if you don't want to share or speak. That's fine. You can just listen the whole time. No pressure at all. It's really just meant to be an open space today for people to ask questions, and I'll go through I've jotted down some, notes of things I would maybe run through. It's kind of last minute, so feel free to ask questions at any point. That's the whole deal, is to give us an opportunity to talk about safety. Hi, Allison. And be of service to the social distancing and the coronavirus stuff that's going on in the world, and really making an effort to be a part of that solution. So I appreciate you guys, and I'm glad we can use modern technology to be a part of that solution. So heck yeah, I'm down. I'm wearing my self-love t-shirt today. Best day ever. Yes, exactly, Allison. Cool. Well, does anybody have any thoughts or have any questions straight away? You're welcome to type in the chat the whole time or just wave on the video unless more people arrive. I hear
Hey
someone's on the
Mel.
phone. Yeah, who's that?
Hey Mel, it's Lori Zito. I'm just phoning in from beautiful Page, Arizona here. So I'm gonna put you on
Yeah.
mute and listen in.
Love it, Lori. Thank you. Very cool. All right. I'll unmute Lori so she can jump in if she wants to. But yeah, guys, so I mean, how many of you were intending to go to a safety day today and couldn't because of what's going on?
Me.
So it's it's a tough decision-making process, I think, at this point, depending on where things are. Marion raised her hand. Gotcha. Yeah, so cool. So I mean, I'd say we want to just start by going over basic stuff. Start by talking about what do we do to affect a safe skydive, right? Like, I plan my skydive. I make sure I'm talking to the people I'm jumping with, and we make a plan for what we're going to do, and we talk about people's various experience levels, and we make sure that the plan that we are putting together is something that's going to be safe, and it's going to be something that is appropriate for those people we're including on a skydive like that. When we get to the point where we're going to actually do the skydive, of course, we are doing our basic gear checks, right? We're checking our gear, making sure all of our gear looks good, 3 rings, handles, pins, all of the things that we do when we do a gear check. Then, of course, what else? Any other thoughts? I mean, I have lots of thoughts, but I don't want to just talk at you the whole time. You're welcome to participate.
I just think communication is key, in this sport. I can't tell you how many times I've been, you communicate one thing, and by the time you get to the loading area, sometimes when you're even in the plane, you know, things change. So
Mm-hmm.
it's important to always keep that communication open. And I've learned a lot of that, especially jumping with you and listening to how you listen, you ask, what's everyone doing? So you have a picture in your head of what the sky is going to look like. you know?
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, yeah. That communication with not just amongst the group that you're going to be going with, but also amongst the people on the plane and who will be near you potentially in the airspace, in the pattern under canopy. So those things are in terms of exit order and deployment altitudes. Those are all things that we want to ask about. It's funny that sometimes I think people can feel nervous to ask other people what they're doing. Like it might be like an accusatory thing, like I don't trust you. Well, that's okay. You know, you don't need, it doesn't need to be an accusatory conversational communication. It can be just a genuine, I want to know what's happening around me for my own safety and for your safety as well. So I've always really tried to lead by that example and just be like, hey, you know, and then if something does seem off, we can address those situations as they come about. For example, Skydive Orange is a place I organize a fair bit. And during boogies, they don't allow anyone to do tracking dives or angle dives without an organizer. And so in the loading area, we would occasionally during boogies find people that were going to do that type of skydive without knowing that rule. And so we would have to adjust their plan before the load went. So that's just an example of when communication can help keep the collective safer. So yeah, and that very good point. Before we even get to the loading area or go to actually get on the plane, what's something else we're gonna look for?
Well, I just wanted to add to a couple things you said earlier, and maybe I'm jumping the gun on it,
No, go
but
for it.
I've
Yeah, I
done
mean,
some,
well, we'll
yeah,
go over lots of stuff, but happy to talk
yeah,
about stuff in whatever order. Go ahead, Lori.
yeah. Well, two things. Number one, I've done some load organizing this past year or so, and people's jump numbers can be deceiving. Just because they've got 1,200 jumps doesn't necessarily mean they've got all the best habits. And so that's one thing to be cautious of, is just because somebody has a big jump number, it doesn't necessarily mean that the skill matches the number. And the second thing,
makes
having done
sense.
a lot of safety in my professional life, there is a way to have positive conversations about safety. And I usually approach it from, you know, feigning my own ignorance or real ignorance. Hey, you know what? You know, I don't do it that way. I do it differently. Help me out. Why do you do it that way? And try to talk through some of the issues you might perceive. You know, make it seem like it's your ignorance or you know, you're trying to learn, and that usually helps facilitate a conversation.
That's cool.
Lori, to speak to that, when we the truth is that we don't even need to feign ignorance, is that we genuinely don't know what's in another person's thought process. So it really does behoove us to go to someone with curiosity first. So I think you're pointing to something that really does help mitigate conflict on a drop zone when we are talking about safety and when people really don't want to feel like they've screwed up or that they're being attacked or something like that. It's really a useful way to approach it, to really ask first, you know, because once you understand their thought process and understand what people have done, it's still a learning opportunity for everyone. So I just want to put that little nuance into what you shared about feigning ignorance and actually being like, you really owning that you don't know what they did and why they did it, and we can ask about that, and that's great. Make sense?
Yep.
Cool. I'm
No,
like, Lori's
I
probably on
keep
mute.
I'm outside and it's really windy and I'm
Yeah.
near an airport, and so I've got you on mute. So when you talk to me, I have to dig the phone out, and that takes a while. But yes, it makes sense. And
Yeah,
you
no
know,
worries.
I say feigning because, you know, sometimes you've got a good idea, but you're right. You really don't know what somebody else is thinking. But it's a great opportunity to learn too, whether you agree or disagree. Just understanding their thought process. It's a good point.
Absolutely. And the assumption that no one is trying to hurt anyone else. We always can go into these conversations really assuming that people are doing their very best. And even if they have screwed up and done something unsafe that needs to be rectified and addressed very pointedly, that can be done in a kind way. So yeah, love that. Love that. So that's sort of a subtopic on in terms of safety and communication and affecting it in the community, because the reason that type of thing matters, the reason conversation and how we communicate matters, is that if someone or we incite defensiveness in people, or and we get people really triggered into that sort of right and wrong judgmental zone, then it's really normal for people to just dig their heels in instead of being part of a collective solution, or feeling safe, quote unquote, safe to be wrong, safe to be wrong and to learn from whatever has happened, because it's a humbling thing when we screw up in skydiving. And so we want to be kind during that process, because that makes for more expeditious, safe solutions to be implemented by the individual and the collective. Cool? Makes sense? Feel free to just throw a thumbs up if you are on mute. I'm good with, I like some kind of interaction. I don't like talking at people too much, but
A bit later.
yeah. So Pat, hi, you joined us. Welcome. So we're kind of we're already diving in. So just join us where we are. So guys, I mentioned, what else do we want to think about? We're obviously prepping our skydive. We're talking to people around us. We're doing our gear checks, all of those things. What's another thing that we're checking before we go and board an aircraft? Any thoughts? The winds? Yeah, weather. Exactly.
Weather.
Exactly. Weather.
Weather.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to trick you guys with any of my questions. I'm more like, we're going over real basic stuff, baseline stuff. So we're looking at the weather. What are we looking for?
Gusts.
Yeah, we're looking for gusts. We're looking, what is the winds doing? So
Dust devils.
yep, dust devils, places like Arizona and California. They can certainly be present in other areas where there is not dust. So looking for trash to be being picked up, stuff like that. What else?
Can I say something too?
Yeah, please.
I'm a fairly new skydiver, and I don't jump consistently. And I find that I watch the wind very closely because I am very conservative. So I find myself not going on the plane or taking myself off a load if the wind's, if it's just too windy, and I stick by that. In the beginning, I was on one jump, and it wasn't pretty. And I learned from that. So sometimes it's okay to take yourself off a load or not jump if you just don't feel good about it. And I had to learn that the hard way.
Oh gosh. Well, Marian, you brought up literally one of the next things on my list. So I love that. Thank you for sharing. I'm always open to hear what people's experiences are. And I love and I super respect and give you kudos for being on a call like this as a newer jumper. Like, this is great for you to be doing and immersing yourself in. So thank you for being a part of that in our bigger community. Where are you from, Marian?
I'm in Colorado, so jumping here is on a whole nother level.
Yeah, higher, faster landings, I bet, right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Well, okay, so what Marian brings up, so we're talking about the weather, we're making sure the winds are good for us, and Marian brings up a good point in the sense that she is at a certain level and other people are at a certain level and other people are at a different level, and we all have various parameters by which we make the decision to jump or not jump. Right? There's tons of different things that go into that decision for each individual every time they decide to jump, to get on a load, and then to ultimately exit the aircraft and go. Make sense? So as newer jumpers, it totally behooves you to make more conservative choices. One of the things that I say is that there's always another day to skydive, right? There's just no, like, the benefit to patience in the process as a young skydiver will take you far in this sport. It will also set you up to be a leader if that's something you care to be, not to be overly scared, not to make the skydiving experience a scary one, because that sucks, that's not fun, but to rather understand for each of us where the collective not the collective, sorry, but our individual bubble of feeling safe is for each of us. Now, stay with me because there's more to that. But Marian, so you sound like you're really making those conservative choices based on the number of jumps that you have and the experience you have and the environment that you jump in. Cool. Love that. Each of us are making those same decisions based on, again, all these factors. One of the things that I jotted down to share is that gut check, right? That Marian mentioned. If you don't feel good about it, it's totally cool to just wait, Just pull yourself off the load, go on the next load, watch the loads for a handful, grab an iced tea, chat with your pal, watch someone pack. Like, there's loads of cool things you can do on a drop zone when you're not feeling necessarily solid about actually jumping. So that's something I always encourage people, that patience, that real patience in our trajectory. And why I say that is that it can get so easy. It's so hard for us, at least for me. I remember this as a young jumper. It can be so hard for us not to just want to go so bad. Like, we just want to jump so bad, because it's so insanely fun, and maybe other people are doing it and we're not really sure. So just remember that it's always okay to take your time in those types of situations. Sound fair?
And and I would add, if people are pushing you to go outside your comfort zone, maybe they're people that you want to think twice about jumping with. People should respect your decision to jump or not to jump.
Absolutely agreed. 1,000,000% agreed. One of the things about that is, this is sort of an expanded discussion too. So just for a second, the trusting of our, I want to go make sure we go certain places with this conversation of trusting our gut, trusting our intuition. There's always another day to skydive. If, as Lori said, if someone is pushing you for, that is not cool. Like, don't even worry about that. Like, you are likely to experience that, and it's part of the growth process as a skydiver, in my experience, that being comfortable and confident to make our own decisions is an important piece of our individual puzzle of feeling good about and really strong and confident and safe in our sport. So, yes. The other side of this conversation is the fear part, right? Because fear is totally normal in skydiving. We're doing this crazy thing. We are, as young jumpers, we're new. We maybe have a lot going on in terms of, okay, I just looked at the weather. Okay, they're talking to people on the load, and I don't necessarily know what's going on. I know how to arch, or I don't really know how to take grips very well yet. I'm trying to perform. I'm wanting to make sure I'm checking my altitude. I'm jumping a new helmet that I just got, whatever. There can be so many different things going on as we grow in the sport. So this is useful to review for young jumpers, but useful to review for any jumper at any level. And I'll get to why. Because we don't necessarily want to just scare ourselves out of never jumping either, right? We want to really kind of breathe and be in a mindfulness practice, sort of, as Michelle, I know you talk about mindfulness a lot, but in a mindfulness practice and learning the distinction in our own body's reaction to what is fear and what is intuition. Now, if we don't know, because it's hard to know what that is. And so as we grow in that understanding of ourselves, it behooves us to make more cautious decisions. And what that means is we make the decision to jump when it is inside of the zone where we're sure, where we feel a higher level of confidence. So our fear might still be present, but we're still aware, like, yeah, I feel pretty solid my parachute's going to open. I feel pretty solid that I'll be able to pull. I feel pretty solid that the people I'm with are safe to be with, right? And so lots of those different questions we can ask ourselves. And if we ever reach a point on those questions where we're not sure, that's maybe our boundary at that point in our trajectory of learning. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Yep. Cool.
Yep.
So looking for that. Now, where I wanted to go with this is that, and this is a big safety piece in my experience witnessing people in this decision-making process, in the wildly fun, addictive early stages of our sport. People can get into a stage where they have a certain number of skydives, can be anywhere from 300 to 1500 or whatever. And there's this effect called the Dunning-Kruger effect. Who's heard of that? Anybody? Michelle's raising her hand. Annette's not. Cool. The Dunning-Kruger effect is basically a psychological effect. And I'm not a psychologist. I'm a life coach, and I work with people on this type of mental work. But just to put that caveat out there, I invite you to do your own research and talk to people about it if you want. But what the Dunning-Kruger effect is it basically is when a person overinflates in their own mind their own skill. And so in skydiving, when we in our own mind think we are better than we are, we put ourselves at great peril. So that's why we see accidents with parachute pilots, swoopers that are going too aggressively too quickly in their trajectory as a canopy pilot, as a high performance canopy pilot. So that's that's where we see it the most. But it can happen anywhere. And so we want to just kind of check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. And I'm not immune, like none of us are immune to this, right? We can easily get to a point where, you got 1,000 jumps and you're getting to this very sort of complacent and just kind of zone where you're like, I got this. And in a lot of ways, I'm sure that you do. So I'm not trying to say we're all a bunch of idiots and we don't know when we're good or when we suck. I'm not trying to say that. It's more to just really be vigilant about consciously checking your safety boundaries and making those smart decisions and making those safe decisions. Going back to Lori's point, if people are pushing you or trying to make you feel less than, or it's uncool to be cautious or patient or whatever, my personal stance always is that it's safe is always coolest. Like safe is always coolest, no matter what. Being cool, trying to be cool if we aren't sure can kill us in skydiving. And so really just remember that being safe and asking questions and taking your time, that's always going to be coolest, because that's going to keep you around in the sport a lot longer. Does that make sense? I don't mean to scare people. I'm not trying to be scary here, but that's just the reality of our sport.
Truth, yeah. It's
the reality. Yeah. Any thoughts on this, guys?
No, not
I
really.
think that,
Yeah, go ahead. Lori, go ahead.
is the other person done? I kind of cut him off.
Yeah, she's good.
Okay. I was just going to say, sometimes it is really hard. For example, I've been in the situation where, you all make plans to meet your friends. We're going to do eight-way exits. We're going to do 8-way. And you get there and the winds are sketchy and you realize you're going to make it a 7-way, which is not 8-way.
Yeah.
And, you got to believe in yourself. It's like, and invariably, as soon as you stand down, there is 1 or 2 other people that were waiting for somebody else to do it first. So
Correct.
Stick to your guns. If you're not comfortable, do it.
Correct. Yeah, I had to do that many, many times over as someone who was a load organizer and event organizer. And, I think about the days running Chicks Rock at Skydive Elsinore, where there's hundreds of people there. Hundreds of people there. And it's not that I'm making the decision for everyone, right? It's more that knowing that when we are, and this is more for load organizers or people in leadership or in perceived leadership at a drop zone, is that people hopefully are, and often are looking to those people to make and align their decisions with. So have I been perfect in my decision making over the years? Hell no. No way. Have I learned over time that it is better in that leadership role to make the more conservative choice because of what Lori just said? Yes. Now, why that also matters is that when we do go and we are up there and we're kind of freaking out, we are even more at risk to screw up because we're not in a calm state. So again, this is not necessarily meant to scare everyone off from jumping, that we always have to stay on the ground. It's more just to be really mindful about those choices, and to also lean into these skills of managing our own fear and managing our own sort of automatic decision making, especially in a social environment that we care about, right? We want to go jump with our friends. We don't want to disappoint our 8-way team. Those all of those forces are going to be on us. So just to keep those in mind, because there's lots of days that are beautiful. There are tons of days that are beautiful for skydiving. Tons of times when skydiving is awesome, and that's when we land and we have the best day of our lives. So like that's why we talk about this stuff, so that we can keep having days like that. Cool. All right, so let's keep going. I see Debbie just joined us. Hi, Debbie. We're just jamming on our conversation here. Thanks, Annette. I appreciate you getting my humor. Okay, so we've done all this stuff and we're like, you know what? It's good. We've checked with the people on the load. Everything's good. We're boarded. What do we do when we board an aircraft? How do we see? Helmets on. Okay. Helmets on. What else?
Claim your space if you're a woman.
Fair enough, my sister.
That's right.
Fair enough.
I like it.
So we're putting on our seatbelts. What else are we doing?
I just do like a safety and EP check. I just check my handles. I check my, everything. I just have this little thing that I do.
Yeah, that's great. You have a routine, a process of things you're touching and checking. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I do as well, Marianne. I absolutely have this process I've used for many years. Anything else? What else?
Yes.
Something else I look at is who's on the load. I actually do it before I get on when I'm on the tram, is who's on the load with me, who knows Skydive Arizona, and who's new here.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. That would be probably something we would determine when we're asking what people are doing, so that we would already know that. Just Lori, cool when you do it. Obviously, you're a load organizer, so maybe someone else has asked questions. I'm more saying for people that are newer to this type of communicating, that it's usually better when they're either in the loading area before they're actually in the process of boarding. We'd ideally have this information collected before that part of the process. But if we haven't, it's still okay to ask. There's plenty of times that I've asked in the airplane when I didn't get the information ahead. So yeah. Anything else?
Well, to what Lori was saying, sometimes I look at you could see everyone in the loading area, but sometimes it's good to just get a second look, right? I mean, it's usually, a handful of people. You're not going to remember, but sometimes it's what the person's wearing, if a suit stands out, or something like that. Like she said, who's new, who isn't here, and just knowing who's on the plane with you,
Yep,
knowing
absolutely. For sure. When you're asking people what they're doing, what are you asking them? This is a question for anyone.
Well, two parts. Like I say, I observe, who's new and whatnot, but then I ask them what they're doing, for exit order, whether they're going to free fly or belly fly or track. If they tell me one thing, but they're wearing a completely different suit, that's usually, okay, that might be somebody to keep an eye on.
Yep.
And, exit separation, anticipated ground speed and just to make sure before things get too difficult to hear, it's like, hey, ground speed, fast today or whatever, and just kind of plant a little seed in their head that, or ground speed slow and, they need to, give more time.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned earlier, Lori, about jump numbers not necessarily being an exacting indicator of someone's abilities or a heads upness. I still ask that personally because it is a clue to potentially more information about a person's abilities. Again, not that it's a hard and fast way to determine that. It's just usually something that can show you because again, it's not meant to be like, what are your jump numbers? Because back in the day, and I don't know if it's still something people feel, but I got questions around that, like where people would feel like that was sort of like a aggressive question. And I really don't believe it is. I really believe it is, I'm just curious. I'm just wondering what's going on. It's just part of that learning and figuring out what's happening around us. And it can make more of a difference when, say, we're finding someone who's doing like a solo free fly, when they haven't, they're doing a solo, they haven't learned how to fly head down yet, they're trying it. So that means that person is likely to need more direction. Not always. Sometimes they've gotten the direction, they understand that they are likely to be traveling, they need to be perpendicular to the line of flight, stuff like that. Exit separation, as Lori mentioned. That's just one example of where jump numbers and sort of what a person is doing coupled together can be information we need. Cool. Yeah, Pat, no worries. I see you there. Oh, and Janine, I see you have your hand raised. I don't do hand raising very often with
It's
Zoom. I
me.
apologize. Go
Sorry,
ahead, Janine. No, it's okay. Awesome. This is
on that. As a load organizer for many years, I have gotten into the habit of asking people their experience rather than a jump number. Number one, I think it's a softer approach. It's not as aggressive, maybe, as
You're right. Be aggressive. Yeah.
and it usually opens up people to giving me more information than just a number. Almost everybody answers me with a number, but they also explain, I have so much tunnel time, or I'm just learning this skill.
Yep.
Like 1,000 jumps, but I'm new to free fly.
That's great. Love it.
Those things. And then also I ask in the boarding area, anybody who appears to be newer, what their pull altitude is, because people who are doing belly flying and are getting out before free flyers, if they're newer jumpers, they may be pulling at a higher altitude and also flying larger parachutes. And that's something the group behind them needs to be very aware of.
Absolutely. 100%. Anything else to add to this piece? Yeah. And guys, thank you. This is, again, we're sort of putting this together sort of on the fly. Bad pun, sorry. But no, this is great. This is all stuff that we, as part of that process, sort of pre-boarding. Yeah, great. Anything else to add to that part of it? Awesome. Very, very cool. For sure. Yeah. Janine, I do the same thing. Those are definitely critical pieces of information with the exit separation and the pull altitudes, for sure. No question about it. And that's part of our dive plan, right? So in the prep part of our process before we're going to skydive, we are doing the same thing in a more micro situation, right? We're asking the people that we're jumping with, where are you comfortable deploying, and we talk about that. And that's goes to obviously the basic plan that we have for ourselves as an individual, and then how that basic plan that we have for ourselves fits into the groups that we decide to jump with. So for me, I deploy at 3,500 feet. I mean, obviously, if a situation has me deploying at 3, that's okay, but I am not ever shooting for deploying lower than 3,500 feet. And my personal decision altitude is 2,000 feet. So what are yours? Anybody want to share?
For me,
No worries.
$4,000 for me to pull.
Cool.
I don't pull it 4 or 5.
Okay, great. What's your decision altitude with a malfunction?
Just a standard 2,500. I mean, I haven't had any kind of that type of malfunction, but where I had to make any decisions. But just a standard
Yeah,
2,500.
yeah, sorry, 2,500. Yes, I agree. Yep. Michelle, you were going to say something? Yeah, I think higher is better personally.
Yeah, same
I'm
with
sorry,
the
I was thinking of the
I was
BSRs.
like
I'm sorry.
that.
But
Same
yeah,
thing.
2,500 is my decision altitude as well. And basically the BSRs I think are at 1,800 feet. Gosh, I should know this.
For Class
That's
B, I think,
yeah,
and
which
C
I would
is
not
1,800.
recommend. I mean, that's me personally. I'm a more cautious person, but yeah, the idea of cutting away at 1,800 feet scares me a lot. I would definitely want to be above that, which is why my main deployment altitude is also higher so that I have more time. That's my reasoning behind that. But yeah, go ahead, Michelle. You were going to say something?
Oh,
Oh, no, she wasn't. She's smiling. I love it. And I see, okay, yeah, Janine, 2,000 feet decision. Allison, 2,500. Cool. Yeah, I love it. And what's great is that you're making those decisions for yourself. And then we know those decisions. We go into a skydive. And I don't know if you guys have been following Dan BC recently. I mean, he's amazing all the time, but more recently, he's been sharing a lot more about safety. And I super encourage you to go and sort of look at his Facebook feed of recent weeks because he's put out some really great information on 2020 safety and a call to the community. And I love that because I feel like he's one of the coolest people. We talk about cool. I personally am like, he's one of the coolest people around. And I love that he's leading from that type of example.
Yeah. Who's that you were talking about? Michelle's asking as well. Who's
Oh
that?
yeah, I'm sorry, Dan BC, Dan
Dan BC.
Brodsky-Chenfeld.
Okay.
Yeah, let me post his Facebook page
Thank you.
in the chat. Yeah, he just posted a video, and you probably got the USPA
Oh, yes.
email. He's the guy in the video.
Okay.
Brodsky. There he is. Dan is the bomb. Here, I'll just send you. So I'm sending the Facebook thing because he shares a lot on Facebook. But yeah, you can find him lots of different places. He's the general manager and I think SNTA of Skydive Paris. But he's been skydiving 40 years and is very experienced on many levels. Cool. So given our deployment altitudes and those plans, that goes into our skydiving plan, of course, as to where we then schedule our break off, where we say, and that is dependent on the person pulling the highest in the group, right? So if we're jumping with Marion and she has a 4,500 foot deployment altitude, we're going to plan our skydive and position ourselves in the aircraft lineup based on that deployment altitude. And we're going to determine who's around us and where it is safe for us to deploy relative to other groups, right? Because just because Marion is deploying at 4,500 doesn't necessarily mean we need to deploy at 4,500 as well. It means that we need to determine whether we have to based on the load. Does that make sense? So all of these questions go into our planning and give us a sort of the best chance for entire safety throughout our skydive and throughout the load. Any other thoughts on that?
oh,
So I did mention Dan. One of the things I had on my list was, in terms of basic safety, is that continuing education, is to just continually engage in conversations, in different articles or videos. It's not like we need to spend all our days doing this type of thing, but just to say that that type of information and those opportunities are available to us quite readily. And so for sure use them as you are called and stay current in your mind just as much as you are current in the sky, as much as you can be. So, okay, we get on the load, we put our seatbelt on, our helmet is on. Now, our helmet, if it is on, it is also fastened. So a lot of people forget this piece about a projectile. So a lot of people, you know, will put their helmet on their head, but they won't fasten it, kind of like the skateboarders of the 90s, where it was cool to wear a helmet that would then fall off your head if you fell on the pavement. It makes no sense. So as in the event of an aircraft in a crash, those helmets can become projectiles and can hurt other people or kill other people. Obviously, of course, potentially hurting yourself by not actually having the helmet on your head. If you decide not to wear the helmet to take off, that's okay. It just needs to be secured in your seatbelt. It can't just be in your lap. So the helmet needs to be secured, as do other things that could be projectiles. The other thing to keep in mind is your back and your handles when you are moving about in any tight space. So any aircraft is a tight space. People are around. We got to make sure that we're not just banging our shit around. Like, containers do open prematurely. Did you guys see that there was a long video posted a few weeks ago with a whole series of examples of a premature container deployment in the aircraft. So when a container opened. You guys see that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
That was crazy.
So I'm happy to share it. Yeah, it's a good video because that is real. It was Jump Run. I was at Skydive Sebastian. This is probably 2008, something like that. It's Jump Run. The door is open. It's an otter. And there's a guy sitting on the bench that's behind the pilot. So closest to the door, his legs are over the end of the bench and he's sort of looking out the door. He's sitting on the bench and I'm sitting right behind him. And I have my helmet on. At this point, I had a helmet that didn't really open. So it was a full face helmet that didn't open. And I noticed that his container is open, that his bag is basically like on my lap. And so I instantly sort of reacted. I put my hand through his backpack, his rig, and I just sort of hugged him. I hugged his rig to me. I like held him to me, but I couldn't really speak because I had a helmet on that was covering this is one reason I really like the G4s and G3s and those more open helmets, not to plug any products in this type of environment, but just to say those helmets that exist that you can see, that is another thing I think that's really good in terms of communication in these types of situations. But the green light was on, his group was climbing out. They were like, let him go. Like, they thought I was fucking around. They thought I was just making a joke and trying to be like that kind of person. So obviously people figured it out. They closed the door and we sorted it out. Nothing happened, but it's the idea of responding because we know. And so that's an example of responding because I knew that was super dangerous potential situation. But I only knew that because I had talked about it at a safety day. I'd talked about it and heard about it from the education that I had engaged in as a young skydiver and continually over the years. So that's why I'm such a believer. That's not the only reason why, but that's one example of why I'm such a believer in Safety Day and such a believer in this continuing education over our experience. So yeah, I mean, the guy ended up thanking me, of course, and it was a good thing. It turned out really well. But so this is why I bring to the table that type of idea, is that's a place when the door is open, right? When the aircraft door is open, that's a potentially dangerous environment. So we're safe getting onto the aircraft, we're safe, we're watching our backpack, we're touching our handles, we're doing our process, we're seat belted to the right altitude, our helmet's secure to the right altitude, we're good, we're climbing, and then we get to Jump Run and the door opens. What are we thinking about then?
Spotting.
Thinking about spotting. So before we get to that, yep, go ahead.
I check my pilot chute when they open the door.
Great. Yes, exactly. So you want to make sure that your stuff is secure. That's a great idea. Definitely. We want to make sure that seatbelts are off. I mentioned that briefly, but that's important in that a lot of drop zones in the summer will open the door, and we really need to make sure that those seatbelts are off, because God forbid a pilot chute did get out the door. Even if the door is open like this much, that's enough for a pilot chute to get out. That's no bueno. If seatbelts are on, the door needs to be closed. That's my personal view, and I would invite pilots to weigh in on this, but that's what I feel like I've learned over the years and what I share with others when asked. Any other thoughts? Love it. So we've checked our gear. We're looking for this type of stuff. Another thing I do on the way up is I do look around, and if I'm, it's not like I'm super, super intense about it, but I look around, and the people's gear that is within eye shot of me, I'll look at it. I'll look at their chest strap, make sure it's routed. I'll look at people's handles, 3 rings. It's not that I do it the entire time, because sometimes I'm visualizing my skydive. I'm going through the plan that we have for our jump so that I'm most prepared for the actual skydive I'm going to be on. So stuff is done in a balance, is what I would say. But yeah, one time I did catch somebody's chest. I mean, more than one time. I actually caught a chest strap undone. One time boarding the aircraft, and the other time during a charity publicity event. It was a thing where I did 25 jumps in a day for charity, raising money for a children's cancer charity, which was super amazing event. Way, way, way harder than I ever thought it would be. And I wrote about this in my column, so I'm happy to share that column with you if you want to read that. But my friend James, and he invites me to share about this. That's why I'm sharing about him specifically, because he knows that this type of storytelling helps people. So it's the last jump of the day. We barely make it. We barely make it in terms of daylight. And so it's like becoming close to like dusk. It's so AKA it's dark in this airplane. It's pretty dark. Not a usual sort of situation. So that's another thing sorry, I'm sort of rambling, but this story is an example of links in the chain. Do you guys know what that concept is?
No.
Has anybody heard what links in the chain is? So Annette's a no. Anybody has anybody heard of that?
Yep.
Okay, I hear a yes. Well, what it is so links in the chain is when multiple things on their own are no problem, but when coupled together lead to an incident. Make sense? So this is a good example of links in the chain building to an incident. We have spent the entire day rigorously doing 25 jumps, which is exhausting. So we're all exhausted. We are late in the day, and the light is not normal. We are doing a group jump, which was, I would not make that decision again. That was an unwise decision. Again, links in the chain. So instead of doing a hop and pop like we'd done all day, we were doing a big group jump with the Air Force team or whatever. And it was a great jump. It was cool. I was happy to be able to jump with them. But in terms of the safety of the situation, it was not the right decision, because I can't tell you guys how exhausted I was. It was really tough. So anyway, in the plane, for whatever reason, I'm ready sooner. For whatever reason, I'm ready sooner than I was on previous jumps, because we were going to full altitude versus a hop and pop altitude. So I'm sitting there, I'm resting. I recognize how challenged I feel. I recognize how beyond my normal energetic availability I am. And I also recognize I'm in a skydiving situation that I need to really fucking care about. AKA, I need to be mindful because I'm so far gone. So I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting there, I'm relaxing, I'm breathing, I'm using all of my own mental and emotional strength skills to focus on only the things that need to be focused on. Okay. And in my typical practice, as I shared earlier, I look around at the gear of my teammates on this particular jump. And I look at my friend James's gear, and he has the black hardware and a black harness. So it's dark. So I look at his chest strap, and seems okay. I look away, and my intuition just ever so slightly touches my mind, touches me. And so I look back, and I can't see it. It's fucking dark in there, guys. And so I have to literally lean, I have to get up, I have to lean over to look at his chest strap, and it is misrouted. And we are at 10,000 feet. So this is a great example of when those things when on a normal skydive, it might seem like overkill, but when those habits come out in a situation with links in the chain, it could save lives. So that's why I say do this stuff, is not for necessarily the everyday experience, even though, oh, can you hear
We
me?
lost you.
Where'd you miss me?
He paused that links in the chain.
Yeah.
And
So
then
I bring up these things about links in the chain because not that it necessarily matters in the everyday experience when we're feeling strong, when it's good weather, when we can see everything, when we're not tired, when all of the things, but those habits can really come in when those links in the chain things do happen and get past us. They can really save lives. And obviously in this case it did, but that's the thing, it might seem like overkill to do it every day regularly, but it's really in those situations where it's going to really help us and help others. So that's something. On top of that is debriefing how it happened. So the next thing I would invite people to do is not only to do those things and make them as part of your practice, but also to really be a growth-minded skydiver. Be a growth-minded skydiver and be a growth-minded person. And when stuff happens, no matter what it is, ask questions. Go, okay, cool. And like Lori and I were talking about earlier, how when something happens with someone else, being really curious, well, what happened? What were we thinking? What occurred? What parts of this what were the circumstances? Yada yada yada. We can do that for ourselves too when we are involved in a potential incident or in any incident. So, yeah, thoughts on that? That was a long share. Thanks for listening.
well, I mean, just jumping a few times with you, Mel. I mean, I've kind of learned that through you, and I've been observant of you, looking at where I didn't do that before. It's I get on a plane and I'm just trying to focus on the skydive, not really looking at everybody else, looking at their chest straps, and I realize how important it is. It's just to just be observant and look at just something as small as the chest strap. You don't realize people in a rush, yeah, they misrouted and they're not aware, and it could have been a disaster. We didn't catch that.
Absolutely. And that invites us back to what Marian was talking about having a process, a routine. So for me, this is to each their own, really. When I put my rig on, so I'm gearing up for the skydive. When I put my rig on, I step into my leg straps. One time, and this is another here, a quick aside to never try to be cool. It never works ever. It was a long time ago when I had not even close to as much experience or as many jumps, and I was at Elsinore one day. And people, how people would sorry. Such an awesome story. You know how people will put their rig on, and this is fine. If people can actually achieve this, it's no big
I
deal.
know where you are going with this. I know where you are going this. I'm not
Yeah.
there yet.
No.
Okay. People put their rig on their shoulders and then they take their leg strap, right?
Yeah,
Hold on. And then they try.
yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I wore my space cat leggings for you guys today as well. See, what? Yeah.
Nice.
That was for you guys. But you know, people put their rig on and then they take their leg strap and they try to like put it on like that.
Uh-huh.
No joke, you guys. I'm in the loading area at Skydive Elsinore. I do that. I get the leg strap caught right here on my ankle and I'm like, ah, ah. I like fall over like a freaking like timber, fall flat on my face. And it's so embarrassing. And no joke, literally ever since that day, I put my rig on like I'm a student. I have 11,000 plus skydives and I still put my rig on like I'm a student and I'm cool with it because I'm like, it doesn't matter. Anyway. Anyway, where I'm going with that is I put my rig on, I get it over my shoulders, and similar to like when I get into a car, as soon as I get into a car, the first thing I do is I put my seatbelt on. Like that's my process of getting into a motor vehicle. And so when I get into my rig, I put it on and put it over my legs and over my shoulders, and I immediately put my chest strap on. I put it on in a secure way. So I thread it and I actually tighten it to where I would be skydiving with it. So I can then walk around with maybe my loose chest strap because I'm maybe a little bit early, but that's part of my process that makes me know that I'm secure in my rig. So just a thought on that, but lots of people can decide lots of different ways, but having a process that is repeated and consistent for you is really smart. That's my take.
I
Any
was
thoughts on
taught that from day I was taught that from day one, that anytime you put on a rig, the first thing you do is, is fasten your chest strap. So I'm glad that was the first thing. It stuck with me, and so that's the first thing I do as well.
Yeah,
Get the chest
I
strap
see
on.
people put their rig on, leave their chest strap open, tighten their leg straps, and leave their chest strap to last. And I'm always nervous for those people.
It
I don't
feels
know
weird.
why. I'm just always nervous for those people. So whether that means that that's not the right process, I'm sure they're fine. You know what I mean? It's just for me, it's not what I choose. So just something to reflect on if you never thought about what your process is and why you've chosen it for yourself. Cool. Any other thoughts on that before we move on? Cool. So we've made it to jump run. Doors open. We're aware of the environment. Everything's looking good. Now what do we do?
Jump.
We jump. Fuck yeah. We jump. And what are the things that we want to keep in mind for safety during that part of our skydive?
Well, exiting, depending on the jump and what you guys are doing, exiting, especially if you're going to be outside of the aircraft, watching for the walls of the door opening,
Yep.
Catching those pilot chutes,
Yep. For sure.
snags, I guess any kind of snags. I saw a video yesterday. It was the first time, two guys jumping and they exited together, and he had the canister, the foot strap that holds the smoke grenades.
Yep. Smoke canister. Did he have a canister of smoke?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a whole group jumping out, and the canister caught on just the trimming of the reserve tray in the back of his
Oh,
friend's
yes, I
rig.
saw that video.
You saw that? Yeah.
I did.
So yeah, it just goes to show you, like, it's the little snag, it just, luckily he
Yeah.
got out of that.
Yeah, that's a good thing to bring up in general about gear and what we are wearing. And so I wrote lots of different things on my list of things to cover. Like, for example, we can talk about, and just for the moment we won't, but belly flying, free flying, wingsuiting, angle flying, canopy piloting, whatever version of skydiving that we're doing, we can talk to our local coaches to get more nuanced on these discussions, because I don't think we'll necessarily have time to cover everything, nor am I someone you could even talk to about wingsuiting. That's not my area of expertise. I would direct you to other coaches for that. Yeah, so my point is that in your example, Annette, bringing up this, so on this skydive, there's something different happening. Oh, and I also mentioned, of course, camera flying, where we want to talk to our local coaches as well and really think about that, because we're adding something to our skydive. So just to briefly talk about that the camera piece, there's I believe a recommendation that it is 200 jumps or more to be able to jump a camera. I think that's great and smart, because I think we barely know what we're doing at 200 jumps as it is. So I don't say that as a disparagement. I simply say that as a respect to our sport. And so for people to add additional things, what happened in that video where a person who is obviously experienced is jumping with another person who is obviously experienced, they have this additional element of a smoke canister because they have a cool plan. They're going to make some cool videos. I'm all about that. I'm a total fan. Think that's great. There's no reason we can't do that stuff. It just behooves us to think about what additional complexity that additional thing adds. And so what are the snag hazards, right? Like, what does this smoke bracket look like? Is there a way I can make it less of a snag hazard? So we talk about that with camera flying as well. How can we make this less of a snag hazard? What can I get my helmet off quickly if I needed to? Will my camera rip off? You know, and again, asking these questions, should I be even jumping a camera with my experience? Should I even be jumping a camera given the kind of skydive I'm doing? Maybe I want to take it off for this skydive, even though I have maybe 250 jumps, but I'm doing something that's testing my I'm feeling a little more nervous. So maybe I'll take it off and remove a little bit of that extra stress and complexity. So those are our decisions and ways we can make our individual skydive safer and being more mindful about those added complexities. Make sense? Because like how the video, again, Annette, that you shared, and just for people who didn't see it, basically the smoke canister, as Annette said, hooked on somebody's gear, on their actual container, on the reserve, like closing flap, something like that, like on one of the flaps on the main rig. And there's like pretty much, I wouldn't say any way to predict that that would have happened. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't to me look like they were doing anything unsafe. It's more just go, shit, wow, shit can really happen. So let's be really mindful about snag hazards and all of those things, and our readiness and preparedness on any jump. Make sense?
Yep.
Cool. All right, so we are on a skydive that doesn't involve smoke canisters, and we're climbing out. We are watching our gear. We're making sure to keep, Marion said she's checked her handles, so everything's good. We're climbing out with thoughtfulness about where our backpack is so that we don't catch handles or rub our pins on the bulkhead. Cool, right? Anything else? What else?
It's a lot of things. Just learning, how to, when you exit the aircraft, right? Like how to hold the bar, inside versus hand over. I've had to learn the hard way, by
Right, right.
catching my knuckle that, that's not the way you hold the bar. So yeah.
Yeah, there's so many little details. And
The camera step, you know, upper body strength, how many people at the door, what's the safest amount of people that you
yep.
could put at the door, stuff like that.
All keeping in mind the information we collected in the loading area about exit separation and all the stuff. I love that you shared it like that, Annette, because I think that alone speaks to goes back to the patience piece when we're learning how to jump. Like we might want to be doing these sort of bigger jumps, but it's more complex. There's more things to think about when we're doing those types of jumps. I mean, again, it's not that we can't be included in those jumps. It's totally good to be included in those jumps. It's more just when sometimes that's the load organizer's job is to include one newer jumper, for example, because of the environment being more complex. Like when I would load organize a lot, and I care so much about including young jumpers and helping young jumpers learn. That's why I do so much coaching now relative to young jumper sort of camps, where I deliberately organize a group of maybe whatever, I don't know, 15 people, and not that we don't jump all together, obviously, because that wouldn't be safe. But we start to learn the skills that can get those people to being a part of 6 ways, 7 ways, 8 ways, and beyond in those environments that are more manageable for their current level. So when we start to participate in these bigger groups, it's important that the load organizers are aware of the skill level that they're including so that they can make sure that the group as a whole is as safe as it can be and not putting anybody in too stretched of a situation, which most, I'm guessing the people who are on this call know that. It's just saying it more as a reminder. Cool. So yeah, we could go on and on about lots of different things, and that's more of a coaching thing. So let's go on. We've exited. We're cool. Our safety, our exit separation is good. Our exit is safely executed. Whether it's successfully executed remains to be seen, but that doesn't matter. Doesn't mean we're unsafe when we're flipping around the sky. That's what's so fun about skydiving, is that we screw it up so much that we just flip around the sky and it's like, whoa, cool. So we get together, we do our jump, and then we break off and we pull. What then?
Head on a swivel.
Head on a swivel. That's literally on my notes. Solid, Annette. What does head on a swivel mean?
Look around, move your head, see what's around you, up, down, side to side.
What's the reason for that?
To avoid canopy collisions and
Correct.
dying.
Know who's
Correct.
inside with you.
Say that again, Marianne.
Know who's closest to you and who's heading for you.
Great.
Who's trying to kill you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always joke that we're like totally friends until my ditter goes off, then you're trying to kill me and I'm like gone.
I even got mushed one time by Melanie. She's like, I'm out of here.
Peace. Yeah, I mean, theoretically, and this is more of an expanded discussion in belly flying or free flying, that free fall collisions are also a thing to consider. So that's expanded coaching in terms of when we're doing a belly jump and we have a diver, we're doing a free fly jump and we have floaters and divers, and understanding those closing speeds and understanding what can most typically lead to free fall collisions, which can be dangerous. So that I would invite you to talk more with your local coaches as well. If we have time, we can go into those specific details. I'm happy to talk more about that stuff. But at its baseline, belly flying, stopping above the formation. So I talk about belly flying and have them and people being meat bombs. Like, don't be a meat missile. You want to, no matter what, stop out and above, away from your crowd, away from your crew. And then you inch in that sort of stadium approach to get onto the right level and join your group. Skydiving, free flying and stuff, of course, there's tons of stuff there. The biggest issue with free flying is the corking issue, the quick deceleration of someone below that can lead to a free fall collision with someone still free fall speed coming down from above. So those are things those are more advanced topics, but things to think about if you're getting into those disciplines of bigger way belly flying and into free flying with other people. Cool. So head on a swivel. We're under canopy. We've achieved our skydive. We've had a good safe skydive and free fall. We've escaped we have deployed our main parachute. The idea of escape is hilarious to me. Thank you for humoring me. When we are deploying our main, what are we doing? So we're tracking, and then it's time to deploy. Just humor me with the basics of our skydiving experience. What are we doing?
Does it open? Can I steer it? Does it work? Is everything working the way it's supposed to? And
Yep.
who's around? Look before you turn.
Absolutely. Love it. Yes, Marianne. Is it there? Is it square? Is it steerable? Can we land this parachute? Before that, we're obviously waving off before we pull to alert people that we are about to deploy a parachute. We're waving off, we're reaching back, we're deploying. We're obviously looking around throughout the break-off process as well. Something you can work up to, depending on your skill level, is when you are breaking off, and this depends, this is mostly in belly flying, but you can certainly do it in free flying once you end up on your belly, is when you are tracking away. You're sort of in this sort of rigid flat position, your head's here. You can look without changing the orientation or angle of your head or anything, but you can look underneath you to see what you're leaving. So I wouldn't advise that to super new people, because we want to get you stable and have stability with your tracking direction, and ideally with your ability to get flatter. So that's something for newer people to, work up to. But for those people who are maybe at that point where they're tracking well and they're able to really get flat and get away, you can start to just look, just with your eyeballs, just see. It's easy to see because your feet are up and your head is the lowest leading edge of your body as you track away. You can see, okay, that person, that person, that person. You can kind of scan the sky and see. And sometimes when you're scanning the sky, you'll see someone like right near you, and you'll be like, okay, cool. I know I either need to change my trajectory, or I need to be really mindful about where they are and when they're deploying and when I'm deploying. Make sense? Cool. So head on a swivel. We're in our deployment. Ideally, we're keeping our parachute as much as we can faced away from traffic. And if we can't during the deployment itself, which is okay, we can be ready to turn that parachute back away from other people. How do we go about doing that? Any thoughts on that, guys?
Well, the
With your
way I was taught,
risers.
So go ahead, Michelle.
With your risers, I turn with my risers before I unstow my brakes, make sure I'm clear, and if I need to, I just use my risers.
Cool. And that implies that we're not unstowing our toggles, so that we can steer a parachute with our hands on our risers to avoid a collision. Totally. Annette, what were you going to say?
no, well, I mean, yeah, and just, just knowing if you are coming into someone, which way to turn,
Right.
that happened to me once at Carolina Fest, and it took me a while to really kind of look at what did I do wrong in this situation. And what happened was I got so far away from the group. It was one of those jumps that started off with 6 people, and it turned out to be like 10 people, and
Yep.
probably 12 at that time by the time we got out of the plane. And I was in a full track trying to get through these clouds because they they disappeared.
Oh, sweet boy. Sorry. Go ahead.
They disappeared from my view, and just as I'm coming out of the clouds, I see everyone breaking off,
Yep.
and I deployed, and he's not really hurting me.
I
Just,
know. He's so sweet.
he's
He's
he's trying to relax, and I'm talking. Stop. So
For those of you who
anyhow,
can't see, it's Annette's cat is like biting her chin. Hilarious.
so I come out of this track, and then I see everyone breaking off. I'm like, holy shit. I open up, and me and this girl were just coming at each other, and I screamed. I immediately went to my riser because I knew we were going to turn into each other.
Yep.
And I just screamed, turn, turn, turn. And it's like, she never saw me. And
Right.
yeah, it was a scary situation, but I tried to figure out what lesson I could have learned, you know, like I probably shouldn't have went into that full track when I realized that they were disappearing into the clouds. Like I couldn't
Mm-hmm.
see the group anymore, you
Right.
know? And
Mm-hmm.
here I am trying, if I go fast enough, I could catch up to them, you know,
Mm-hmm.
before it's decision time. And to me, that was a bad decision. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of tracked right into them, and then again, just seeing two canopies, just seeing this girl coming into me, was scary.
Did you deploy in the cloud?
Just as I was
Just as you were
coming
coming
out of
out
the
of the
cloud,
cloud. Got it.
I see the group breaking off,
Okay.
and I was like, holy shit, oh my god, they're right there. And I pitched, you
Okay.
know, and
Got
when I
it.
pitched, there was a girl, like it just looked like feet away from me, and I just see her whole canopy opening, and I know she didn't see me. I saw her, but I feel like she didn't see me
Right,
coming
right.
out of this cloud,
Mm-hmm.
and she's going to turn into me. And sure enough, I just see her canopy turning 180. Mine is going in 180. We're going to come right into each other, and I
Yep.
pulled as hard as I could on my right riser to just
Mm-hmm.
turn away from her, you know.
Great. Yeah, and that's the consensus, is to turn right, to miss each
Hmm.
other. So if people
Yeah.
are in that scenario, that's, I think, what people do. Um, love that you shared this story. Thank you, because there's a lot to learn in this story. In the part going back to, okay, we're in the door, we're safe exit. What we didn't talk about is what you mentioned earlier. We didn't expand on spotting. We didn't expand on being in the door and looking out and making sure we, weather-wise, again, we're okay to jump, right?
Hmm.
So it sounds like there were, correct me if I'm wrong, on that day, there maybe were not full cloud, maybe it wasn't full cloud cover, but there were probably a bunch of sort of big fat clouds that you were trying to miss, right?
Exactly.
Yep.
And I was inside of the plane, so I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
part of the first group to go. And, you know, I guess I wasn't like right on top of everyone, that it just seemed like as soon as the group was out, they were gone. And
Yeah.
I'm like, holy shit, like just trying to catch up to them.
And
And
that
yeah,
happens too, is that exit separation for divers versus, like, if we are not right on a group, the distance can get large quickly.
yeah.
Um, what I would say to that, and so this is, again, going back to sort of the load organizer role, and it's not that you're always going to be, and I say you and I mean you general, that we will always be on an organized load such that we have someone in the door that we trust to make a decision for us, right? So we have to know that based on our position, when we end up in group scenarios like that, we have to know that we are giving that trust to the person in the door, to check for aircraft, to check for weather, to whatever, to really manage the door situation for us. So that's good. That's okay. We do that all the time. That's no problem. The reason I bring that up is that in questionable weather situations, in questionable cloud cover, and separated sort of partly cloudy situations, that's why when people are on the way up, when we see clouds, they look at their altitude. They're like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
where is the bottom of this cloud? If I end up in this cloud, which again, we don't recommend, it's not something I would advise at all. Sometimes it happens. People end up going through clouds. They misjudge their spot and they miss the hole where it's blue skies, and they end up going through the cloud. I've certainly been there many times myself. Again, I don't recommend it. The bottom of the cloud tells us, right? So if I end up in this cloud, will I be out of it before I have to deploy? Will I be tracking inside this cloud? Will I be deploying in it? Right? So we're already in the aircraft at this point, right? So this doesn't even bring up the situation of, this can be part of our original weather decision, right? If it's a little too partly cloudy and there's not that many holes, or it's moving quickly, there's lots of different reasons we might decide that the cloud cover is a bit too much or the ceiling is too low, that we don't want to risk it. So we'll stay on the ground. That said, there's lots of times we do risk it and we go into the plane, and we get to the door and there is a questionable scenario. right? Where we're like, oh, will we make this open space? Are we gonna for sure go through a cloud? Do we exit anyway? Like those are decisions that we almost certainly will be faced with as a skydiver at some point. One of the things to think about, because again, it's very situationally dependent, but this is where I invite people to, if they don't have a lot of experience learning how to spot, that they take it upon themselves to talk with their coaches and talk with people who are more experienced at their drop zone and learn and ask for that role. Like, can I spot this load for us? You know what I mean? And have it be a thing that you're doing under the guidance of that experienced person, so that when you become the most experienced person in the door, which will happen, young jumpers become the more experienced jumpers. They eventually are the most experienced person in the door, and they have to then make that spotting decision. So it behooves us to learn that skill and to get really comfortable being that person. That makes sense? Like getting up, sticking our head all the way out the door so we can look straight down, really checking things out. So whether it's a clear day, whether we're like, okay, we're this place, this is where the earliest we would get out based on these upper winds, based on the ground winds, this is the furthest we would get out. Those types of decisions also are things we want to think about when it becomes our time to be in that leadership role. Make sense?
I didn't start spotting until like after 100 jumps. I was terrified to like look out the door, and now I'm it. But going back to that story I told you made me think about when you talked about links in the chain.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the skydive started with a certain amount of people that I was comfortable with, and it slowly progressed where I wasn't feeling comfortable.
Yep.
I knew how I was feeling, but like you just don't say anything. You just kind of
Mm-hmm.
go with it, and
Yep.
it led, to look at what happened. Here I
Mm-hmm.
am. I'm freaking out over the whole jump itself. Now we got this large group. I don't want to lose these people because they need to be in my sight. And, here I am tracking like a full meat missile to catch up to them. And
Yep.
yeah, it could have led to a canopy collision,
Yeah,
just all
or a
bad
free
things.
fall collision. Yeah, that's a great
Mhm.
example, and that story, it really is. And so the it's not fun to be the person who's like, nah, this group's gotten too big for me. I'm gonna go do something else. It never feels that fun to be that person, and it's okay. Sometimes
Mhm.
like Lori said earlier,
Right.
sometimes one person saying it, maybe someone else will be like, oh yeah, I'd rather do a two-way. Let's go do a two-way.
Right.
That happens all the
Mhm.
time too. It's more that when we're worried to speak up is when, you know what I mean, when we're worried to express where we actually are. And again, this is not to not challenge ourselves to grow in the sport, because we will feel that challenge in totally safe situations too. So that's why at the beginning of the conversation, want to always balance this type of discussion with, it's not meant to freak us out. It's only meant to empower us to feel like we can say, I'm not feeling it right now. No. And to take those kind of mental steps to go, this is actually a situation I really do want to participate in. Given it's out of my comfort zone, I'm going to participate in it in this way. Right? So maybe you would say, oh, can you put me closer to the base? Or can you put me in the base? Can you put me floating? I'd feel, and maybe they can't. And that's okay too. And then you can be like, no problem, all good. I'll go do something else. And I'm just not quite comfortable being in that position yet. Thank you for trying to include me. You know what I mean?
Right.
There's loads of different ways things can go and have it be completely cool.
I think it's also important for newer jumpers too, that because in this situation, without putting names out there, this was a load organizer
Mm-hmm.
who allowed this group to build up,
Mm-hmm.
and it was like, you think load organizer, experience, they know better. I'm gonna go with it. I think it's okay for people to know that even if it's a load organizer, it's okay to say, hey, I'm
Yep.
no longer comfortable, like I want
Absolutely.
out or something like that,
Yeah, for sure. And
and
it's
not have
tough.
that pressure of feeling like you don't want to, to load organize it. They're more experienced. You don't want to hurt
Mm-hmm.
anyone's feelings, when you're not
Yeah.
skilled enough, like,
Hmm.
you know,
Absolutely.
Organizers make mistakes too.
Absolutely. That's just where I was going to go, is that it's even the most experienced load organizers, even those of us who grill people about their experience and try to read every nuance of how they share that information to get a read on what they actually can do, we really can't know that. You know what I mean? So that's still, even from a load organizer's position, is a constant sort of weighing of all of the complexities of these decisions that we make. And that's how we get experienced with that, is that we slowly have experiences and we learn. So for example, you're sharing this story, you can learn from that and go, okay, what would I do? So say you were in that position again, like say that, just let's repeat that skydive when we got to the point where you've exited and the group is far away and you see them sort of going away in the cloud. What would you have done differently?
Well, I mean, I probably, I don't know. I really don't know the answer right now, thinking about it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't have gone into that full track to try to catch up to them. Obviously I would have been higher than anyone else. So like, just try to get as close enough and, just be aware of my altitude. And if I lose the group, I mean, I don't know. I guess just deploy higher and then just try to watch everything around you. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Am I?
it's a tough question. I didn't mean to put you on the spot, Annette. Sorry about that, because it's a tough call. Like, your decision that you made seems legit. It seems totally legit. You've gotten into that situation, you see them, you know that you're going to lose them visually. So you're like, fuck, I want to get close to them so that I can still see them. That makes sense. Like, that's a legitimately sort of thoughtful, safely, like, it's directed towards safety. That's a safe choice. You know what I mean? In terms of what you were dealing with. How it turned out, right? You didn't get there quite in time. And so then you ended up in a worse, sort of less safe situation. We couldn't necessarily know that. You know what I'm saying? So, and I know Annette's just dropped off. She'll come back on probably. But yeah, so that's the nature of these situations, is that we have to really be able to think on our feet. So yeah, maybe not diving at a formation that we know we're going to lose in the clouds, maybe instead choosing to actually have more distance, maybe leaving early, pulling high, as Annette said. It really depends, but that then goes into who's behind us. Do I want to pull high? Is that a safe decision? So we need to really be aware of all of that stuff when we have to make a decision like this, on the fly, as it were. So I would say for me, it would be, how do I maintain close enough distance to safely execute the overall plan of that jump while having a safe enough distance away, knowing that the cloud is going to cause some potential for collision. So yeah, tough call. Lori, is there anything you would add on that, or anything you would say?
Yeah, the one thing I would add is that when it's iffy like that, like clouds, I mean, obviously if it's socked in, they're not going to send the plane up. So usually this would happen when there's like clouds are like spotty or intermittent. What I try to do is, in the plane on the way to altitude, I try to make a mental note of where I'm seeing clouds. Was it at 7,000 feet? Was it at 9,000? Because if it's heavy between like 3,000 and 5,000 feet, that's when shit's going to get real. Because
Totally.
then you're going to have a great jump and then all of a sudden break off and everybody's blind. And so I try to pay attention to at what altitude these clouds might show up and whether the layers are thick or thin. Because if it's thin, it's like, okay, be cool, hang out, just drop through this thin layer and then you'll see again. But if they're super thick, I mean, maybe you make the decision to stay on the plane,
Yeah.
Sorry,
Oh yeah.
my phone.
Yeah, no, it's okay, Nat. But yeah, so Lori, I agree. And so that's another story sort of in my young jumper life, where I was jumping at the ranch, and that's where I did some of my earlier jumps. And I had, gosh, I don't know, just over 100 jumps, something like that. And I was jumping with Dawn Pavlou, who's awesome. I love Dawn. And she and I went up, we're going up to do a two-way. And it was sort of iffy weather, kind of moving cloud cover, but, you know, potential for jumping. And so we get on the plane, it goes, we get up to altitude, and it's the two of us, and she's helping me learn how to spot. And we get to the door, and it's totally socked in, like completely can't see the ground at all, nothing. And as a new jumper, I was not sure, like, do we still go? Are we up? Like, I didn't understand at that point in my learning what the decision process would be in that situation. So she, of course, led me by example. Thank goodness. I'm grateful for that, because she basically encouraged me as someone in a position of leadership, in an elevated role of someone like me looking up to her. And she's made it totally okay for us to not go, right? There was no pressure for me to exit. It was like, she also didn't just say, we're not going to go. She really had me in that experience. And I looked out, and we made the decision together not to go. But she led by that example of making it go, like, and really making it clear, like, duh, we can't see the ground at all. It's a pretty obvious decision. We don't go. And that was partly because I at that point was very inexperienced. That said, people with experience, I've seen them make these decisions all the time, where someone will opt out of jumping. Someone super experienced will be in the door. They will decide to stay in the aircraft, and other people will get out even though it is completely socked in. I do not advise that as the decision. I just don't. And the reason is that you can't see aircraft. You are potentially likely to lose each other, like similar in Annette's story. You won't be able to see each other under canopy. And the biggest thing is you don't have any idea where the base is anymore. So if it has gone from partly cloudy to fully socked in, so when we took the plane down on this particular instance, the base ended up at 1,200 feet. So had we gone, I would have, as a young jumper, 100 plus jumps, been opening definitely in cloud cover or above it, most likely in it. And I would have had to fly my parachute in a highly wooded area. If anybody has been to the ranch, there's a lot of forest around that place. It's not a huge landing area. And I would have only come out of the cloud cover at 1,200 feet. Not a good idea. It's just not worth it.
Hey Mel, if you find yourself pulling in a cloud, somebody told me to fly, slow circles in a right-handed pattern. Is that correct?
I mean, it's depends on the situation. I think that flying slow is, yes, the correct move. I think that is a good idea if it is like slow, flat turns.
Okay.
Right? So, because you don't want to be in a sort of any type of a dive, because
Right.
that accelerates you, versus sort of more flat turns will help you kind of just like drill down through the clouds in a smaller sort of cone of airspace. Does that make sense?
Do you think that's DC dependent? Because I think I was at Paraclete when they were talking about that. And luckily they were talking about it on the plane, saying if you find yourself in a cloud, just, slow turns to the right, I guess. Or maybe that's just for that DC. I don't know.
Well, I'd actually want to ask more people, because there is also a part of me that if I was able to see anything and I have some sense for where I am, it's just really so hard to get immediately disoriented when you're in a cloud. So theoretically, we want to get out of the cloud as soon as we can. So that's partly why the idea of doing slow turns is that we will get out of the cloud sooner than we would if we were to just kind of fly straight. and we don't know where we're going. You know what I mean? Theoretically, if we're in a good spot, if we're doing these slow turns out of a cloud, it keeps us relatively in the same spot, right? So we're not just going off to Timbuktu and then we're going to be ending up landing out. So that's another
Yeah.
logic piece as to why to do those sort of flat turns to get us out from underneath. But it's really meant to be flat and slow because we can't see other parachutes, because you don't want to come out, you know what I mean? So that's why doing a turn that's aggressive is not what I would recommend.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so we're running. I love this conversation. This is super good, guys. I appreciate all the sharing and all the everything. So obviously we can't do full, so we have a good parachute, and we'll talk about getting down, but say we don't have a good parachute. Our main parachute is not there, it's not square, or it's not steerable. What do we do?
Scream? No. Cut away. You
Yeah,
know, just get your EPs.
emergency procedures. Yeah, we initiate our emergency procedures. Totally. So that's a big discussion. We probably will run out of time if we try to cover every single thing. So what I want to say before we even start to talk about emergency procedures is, when we can actually go to our drop zones again, when all the craziness of this world is back to some normalcy and you're able to go to a drop zone, I absolutely encourage you to get in the hanging harness and to do your emergency procedures in the hanging harness with the photos. Do that. Do it every single year. It's so, so, so worth it, because we never, even though we talk about, or when we do our routine handle touching and our practice pulls and stuff, it's still helpful to actually pull handles and to be in that sort of orientation where we'll likely be experiencing it. So it's not like a foolproof way to keep us prepared, but it's definitely better than nothing. And I highly recommend it. Cool.
I do that when I go in for my reserve repack. I'm like, hey, can I just pull the handles? And they're always like, sure. So
love it. I do too. Love that. I think that's a really good idea. If you have the opportunity, when you bring your reserve in, put your rig on and totally execute your emergency procedures. Go all the way, deploy your main. Oh shit, I have a problem. Okay. And then initiate your emergency procedures. Yep. Agreed.
Very good. Yeah.
one more thing that I always do, and this is completely out of sequence, my apologies, but
That's okay.
I did want to share it.
Please.
Whenever I go to a new drop zone, I pull up aerials before I even leave my house. So I've got a good mental map of the new drop zone, what I think my outs might be, all that good stuff. I never show up having not looked at an aerial first.
That's awesome. No, Lori, I appreciate it, because honestly, I threw this idea out literally yesterday at like 4 or 5 p.m. I mean, so for me, I was just kind of jotting down things right off my head. And so I appreciate you guys sharing this stuff, because yes, for sure, whether we look at aerials before we go to a drop zone or whether we make sure to get a DZ briefing, obviously at any new place. But yeah, safety day is such a great thing, because how often do you re-look at the aerial of your home drop zone and get a sense for where really are the outs? And maybe we know that because we've jumped into place a million times and that's cool. But if we're not that experienced, it's cool. Take a look. Be like, oh yeah, because as we learn, and this goes with any skill set, anything that we're growing into, whether we're a skydiver or whether we're working on some other maybe physical skill or emotional skill or whatever, we have levels of competency. And with those levels of competency, we also have levels of awareness. And so when we are at this newer level, when we're at a newer jumper and we're trying to learn even just how the 3 rings work, and we're trying to really ingrain our emergency procedures into our muscle memory, that's keeping most of our brain power and awareness busy, And so, yeah, we might have been taught that in our first jump course, but it's very likely that at 100 jumps, there's a lot we'll still learn hearing something again. So that's what why safety day is so good, even for the most experienced people, is that we all have that where we hear something that we of course have heard before. We wouldn't be skydiving at all if we hadn't heard it ever. And if we hadn't heard it ever, well, great that you finally did. Weird that you didn't, by the way. And not about you weird, but meaning like I would be questioning your drop zone safety education procedures in those types of instances. But I'm rambling again, but my point is that it's no problem to hear things that we already know again and again and again. Cool?
That's why I always watch those YouTube videos on emergency procedures. They're great. And I watch them every year. I watch them throughout the season when I can't jump, just to constantly keep that awareness in my head,
Absolutely. One of the things, I'm just looking through at my list that I sort of jotted down. Again, there's so much more we can talk about, you guys, like so much more all the time. That's why I really do invite you to figure out when you'll go to your drop zone for a safety day, whether they reschedule it or whether you simply go and you do it with your friends, or you make it your own self-directed safety day. Make the safety day on your actual drop zone happen. You know what I mean? When we can. So that's something I would recommend. The getting in the hanging harness for sure. Talking to your local coaches in more detail about the skydiving disciplines that you participate in or you're hoping to grow into this year. So whether it's belly flying, big ways, four-way, free fly, bigger way, free fly, wingsuit, angle flying, canopy piloting, or whatever, please do that. So now, camera flying as well. Same thing. Talk to your local people. One thing I want to make sure we cover in a little more detail is the canopy piloting piece. And I definitely recommend getting into a canopy course, whether you jump with Flight One or Alter Ego, or you get coaching with Greg Widmiller. Get somebody who work with a legitimate pro and get that education. One of the reasons I recommend that is because A, it keeps us safer, duh. And the whole point, in my view, outside of course, keeping us safe, which is duh, is that when we are operating safely in all of the zones of our sport, we can have more fun. Like, it is so much fucking fun when we feel safe and we feel respectful of what we're doing and on top of it and vigilant, right? That doesn't mean we're boxing out fun. It means we're making way for the most fun possible. That's my belief, and that's why I'm such a champion for the safety in our sport. So, cool. Let's talk briefly about, we are clear, we have avoided a canopy collision after deployment. What are we then doing to get to the ground safely?
Getting into a pattern,
Yep.
flying predictably.
Flying predictably. Yep. Go ahead, Lori.
Flare.
Yeah, being aware for sure. So same thing, head on a swivel continues. Head on a swivel continues throughout. We're going to go to our holding area, right? Where are we holding? So we're obviously, before we've gone up, we've also determined what are the ground winds. What are the ground winds? Where's the tetrahedron pointing? Where's the thing? Now, a lot of people, and at drop zones I've been to, they like to decide on the landing direction before people land. I don't necessarily love that because winds can change when we are climbing to altitude. That happens all the time. So a lot of drop zones have a policy of the first person down sets the landing direction, which then determines where our pattern, holding area, and directions of travel and flying will be, right? So we can talk more about, how to set the pattern, how to determine that, but basically if we are the person setting the pattern, we are looking at those wind indicators and we're trying to set a safe and predictable pattern for the rest of the load to follow. Okay. If we have missed the first person down, what would you do then?
Look for others.
Look for
People
others.
below you. You
Yeah,
know?
look for other people. Totally. Say you looked for maybe you're like second person down or third person down and you miss the first person, you don't know, and you're unsure of which way the direction is, and you decide to go a certain direction and you realize sort of on your base leg, that you are going the wrong way. What are you going to do?
Oh, that's me. You must be talking about me then. At Skydive Orange, I remember. Yeah, I don't know what the hell, man. I just missed the whole pattern. I'm like, I thought everyone was going this way, and here I am coming into the whole drop zone. I landed off on purpose so that
Cool.
I realized I fucked up. Excuse me. Oh well, I mean,
I
I
don't care.
screwed up. I need to stay away from everybody, you know.
Okay,
For everyone's
yeah.
safety.
Great. And so when you decided to land out, Annette, how did you fly your parachute to achieve that? Like, did you do any big moves? Did you?
No, I
Okay,
still
good.
flew it in the pattern. No low turns, nothing crazy, flat turn. I definitely flew it in the pattern. It was just opposite pattern. And I just made sure I stood way off from everyone else. Where I knew I
Gotcha.
was clear.
Cool.
And I wasn't going to like really piss too many people off.
Well, I mean, the pissing off remains to be seen. We can't control other people's emotions. It is more about you ended up accidentally. Like, this is a great example going back to the very start of our discussion. If someone were to come over to you and be like, what the fuck, Annette? You suck. You totally whatever. Clearly, you didn't intend to do that, right? It's a learning opportunity. So, and so in order to understand just before we get to that part, what I want to highlight in your story is I love that you mentioned flat turns. So for people who don't know what flat turns are, which I would invite you to really learn what they are and practice them under your parachute at higher altitudes to get good at this skill of parachute flight, is that when we are flying what they can also be called is braked turns, where we have our canopy and brakes and we're able to make these small turns which don't move the canopy, they don't roll the canopy around us. It keeps the canopy over our head and we're making turns like this. Because when we're landing safely, what is a critical piece of landing safely under a parachute, no matter what direction we travel? What's something that needs to happen?
Materials over your head.
The parachute is over your head, correct. Anything else?
Land in a clear area.
Clear area, great. Anything else?
Straight and level.
Yeah, exactly. Wings level. And that's basically what you were saying, Annette. But like really keeping that wing over your head. And obviously, as Marianne pointed out, keeping an eye out for obstacles, right? Because if we land wings level, but we fly into the side of a building, that's not good, right? So those are two pretty critical things to keep in mind, as well as other people. So Annette, that's sort of in your story about going, I'm going to land way over here, making this safe choice of, I know I'm going averse to the rest of the people, so I need to do what I can safely for myself individually to keep the collective safe. And in this case, what I can achieve safely is I can land over here as far away from the others as possible. Great choice. Great choice. So say you are landing and you are gonna totally hit the trees. You're like, oh God, if I just keep going wings level, I'm gonna hit the trees or I'm gonna hit a building. What are you gonna do?
Become a tree hugger.
Maybe. I guess it's possible to land safely in trees. I wouldn't necessarily make that first choice. It's going back to the brake turns. It's going back to the flat turns. We're going to do our very best to make a flat turn to avoid that obstacle, keeping that wing over our head so that we can avoid it. And this is where experience matters as well. And this is why we like to limit the number of things that take our attention and our bandwidth. is that I bet you everybody on this call, I bet you whomever listens to this recording after, no matter what the experience has, in reasonable, normal conditions, you can land a parachute probably great, just fine. The thing to keep in mind when it comes to flying parachutes, choosing the type of parachute, the size of parachute, that all matters most when we are in situations that we do not expect. When we are landing out, when we have misjudged our flight trajectory and we are coming up against obstacles, when we are coming in close contact with other people in the pattern low to the ground, those are the experiences where having a more forgiving, docile parachute will help us, and having the skills to react with that docile flat turn approach, but still really avoiding that danger. And also, what was the last thing I was going to say? I just went for my head. Awesome. Well, whatever. If it's really good, it'll come back. But the point is, guys, is to, and this more is in the realm of downsizing and this and that, but the keeping ourselves having that additional bandwidth for extra potential complexity, that is a safe move. And it feels like overreaction. Okay? It feels like you're being overly cautious, because on every given day, all good. You're killing it. You're kicking ass, taking names, right? And so that's where we want to just be patient. Take it slow, And again, it's not to curb people or keep people from growing and evolving and taking steps forward in the sport. It's just a call to all of us to do that very mindfully and respectfully, both of the sport itself, our individual safety, and how we might contribute to the safety of others as well. Make sense?
Makes sense.
Cool. So wings level. We're good. We're coming in. What are we going to do then? Ground's almost here.
Flare.
Flare. Yes, flare. Exactly. I've seen a lot where people, even just landing normally, that becomes a sort of elevated moment, right? They're not coming into any obstacles. They're just landing a parachute. And that moment of like, oh my God, there's the ground. Oh my God, am I going to fly? Is the flare at the right time? Or am I going to do it? That can be a moment where people start to freak out too. And so, oh, sorry, Laura, are you saying something?
That was probably me. Don't look down. Don't look down. Don't look down.
Yeah, well, and yeah, they say to look ahead on the horizon, right? Look forward, look to the horizon, because that gives us a better visual of how high we are off the ground when we don't have those pictures yet. So people, when we're talking about canopy piloting, people talk a lot, or maybe not, I talk a lot about the pictures that we get in our mind, right? So we only can earn those pictures by making skydives, right? So if we're a person with 30 jumps, or whatever, say let's talk about the 30 jump person first. That person doesn't have that many pictures. You don't know what that looks like yet. So of course it's going to take some time to learn what that feels like and what that looks like, such that we can flare well and at the right time and all of this. And that's the reason why we make people jump really large, highly docile parachutes, is that we're learning those pictures. Okay, so where this applies to higher performance canopy piloting is the same thing. So for those of you who are listening to this back, or maybe are on this call and are considering that, it's, again, super fun, totally accessible part of our sport to fly a really badass high performance parachute. It's just another version of a process that we need to respect. So people who have a lot of jumps where they're landing in a sort of a certain way, and then they start to do higher performance turns, it's the same exact thing. You need to catalog pictures of what that looks like and feels like. And the only way to do that is through skydiving. Okay. And so that's why when people try to rush this process because I have a couple thousand jumps or whatever, that's where people tend to get in trouble, is that they forget that they're actually someone with 30 jumps. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Right on, guys. So we killed those 2 hours. Dang. Any last questions? I mean, wow.
I just
Any
wanna
thoughts? Yeah, Marian, go ahead.
I want to thank you guys. I have like 70 some odd jumps, and I can't jump consistently, which is a problem because you don't progress steadily. You just feel like you're starting over. So hearing you guys talk about fear, talking about processes, talking about fucking up, is refreshing because
Oh yeah.
it makes it easier for me to keep sticking with it, because it gets frustrating when you can't jump steadily and you're trying to learn but you just can't due to
Yeah.
various reasons. So it's good for you to put this on, so I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Absolutely. You're welcome. And thank you for sharing that, because it brings up something that is also very relevant to this conversation that we haven't touched on, is currency. And it's true. You call out something really important in terms of a safety discussion, and that how it's so understandable, Marian, that you would feel frustration at wanting to progress more quickly than you are able. And I respect that you take your time with that. And I think it's something for us all to keep in mind. Like, for example, for me, I've always been a person, for almost the majority of my skydiving career, I was someone who lived in a sunny area, and I jumped year round, and I jumped a lot. And I was current, really current. And then in the last sort of 5-6 years of my life, I moved back to the Northeast, and I took a couple of years off. So I had this real experience of uncurrency. And then I became a seasonal jumper. So I now have annual sort of uncurrency, right? Annette's waving her hand.
That's me.
Yeah. And so I call that out because, Marian, just because your maybe life circumstances have it that you are less current, there are lots of people that have that uncurrent patient experience. It really requires patience, and it requires us to really, again, check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. And so, yeah, that was sort of a cool experience for me as someone with a high level of experience, having a new experience, quote unquote, later in life, AKA, I was always very current. And then I had an experience where I wasn't current. That was new to me, even though I had 9,000 skydives. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate you sharing that. Any other final thoughts, you guys?
Yeah, no, I just think it's important. Just like me, I go on current. I got about 500 jumps under my belt, and I think as long as you always remain aware and like educated and about the safety portion of it, you'll still be safe, even if you're not like current as some people are. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. The patience process. And before I forget to say this, again, guys, there's probably lots of stuff I missed. So it's tough to solve world peace in 2 hours. But yeah, talking also to your pilot and confirming and refreshing on aircraft emergency procedures is also really important. One thing Skydive Cross Keys, my home drop zone, does is they bring in the local fire department, so that if there is an incident, so your drop zone will also have a process for when incidents occur, when people are injured or worse. There's a procedure for that. But ideally, and because we're doing this, ideally those things are not going to happen. So that's the hope. But yeah, any other final thoughts?
No, thank you for having this call.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, thanks so much for providing the option. I'm actually away from the DZ today, although it probably is open, but it was great to have the opportunity to participate remotely.
Yeah, and I feel like this is such a sort of interesting parallel to what's happening, is that we are forced to be patient, Right. I would love it. It would be great to be at the drop zone right now with everybody and being able to jump. And we simply, in these current times, are respecting what seems like a bigger, important safety measure. So I respect and appreciate everybody who's participated. And anybody who's watching this recording back, by the way, feel free to drop me a line with any other questions. My email directly is mel@melaniecurtis.com, or hit me up on Facebook, whatever. And anything that I don't know or whatever, I will just reach out to my peeps and find the answer for us. So rock on, team. Love you all. Thank you. Yay. All right,
Thanks,
I'll
Mel.
see you later.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
guys. Yeah,
Bye.
thank you.
Bye-bye.